Restaurant manager threw change at black woman. Minutes later, she revealed she's the owner. The restaurant was buzzing that evening. Plates clinked, glasses sparkled, and laughter filled the air. It was one of the fanciest places in the city, the kind where people dressed in shiny clothes and came to show off. The staff rushed around, smiling wide for rich-looking guests. But when a black woman named Sarah walked in wearing simple clothes, the mood changed. The manager, a tall man named Mark, narrowed his eyes. He didn't like the way she looked. Too plain, too ordinary. Sarah sat quietly at a corner table. She ordered just a small meal and handed Mark some cash when the bill came. Instead of giving her change politely, he tossed it on the floor in front of her. Coins rolled across the shiny tiles. Everyone turned to stare. Some waiters snickered. Mark smirked. "Pick it up if you want it," he said loudly, as if showing the whole restaurant who was boss. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she didn't bend down. She just looked at him with calm eyes, then slowly stood up. Nobody knew she was hiding a secret that would change everything in a few minutes. Mark strutted away, proud of himself. "That's what you get for coming here looking like that," he whispered to another waiter, who laughed. Sarah remained still, her eyes following every detail in the restaurant. The broken smile of the hostess, the nervous hands of the busboy, the fake kindness of the servers. She was watching them, measuring them, but no one realized. She was not just another guest. She was the one who had built this very place from nothing. And tonight, she had come undercover, disguised as someone ordinary, to see how her workers treated customers. What she had just witnessed was worse than she imagined. Her heart pounded as she prepared to reveal the truth. The real storm had not even begun. Mark leaned against the counter, feeling proud of how he handled the poor-looking woman. To him, keeping cheap people out made the restaurant look better. He believed rich clients wouldn't want to sit near someone like Sarah. He didn't know that the rich people he tried so hard to impress were quietly frowning at his behavior. A couple at a nearby table whispered to each other, "That was cruel. This place has no class." But Mark didn't care. Meanwhile, Sarah's mind raced. She remembered the long nights she spent working to build this business. How she had skipped meals to save money. How she had scrubbed floors herself before she could hire staff. This restaurant was her dream. Yet here she was, being insulted in her own house by people she paid. She felt anger, but also sadness. Was this what they did when she wasn't around? One young waiter named James watched in silence. He didn't laugh like the others. He bent down and picked up the coins for Sarah, quietly placing them in her hand. "Here, ma'am," he whispered, eyes filled with respect. Sarah gave him a small nod. That small act showed her there was at least one decent heart in the room. Mark noticed James helping and snapped at him. "What are you doing? Don't waste time on her. Go clean table 6. His voice was sharp. The other staff chuckled again. Sarah clenched the coins tightly in her fist. She knew it was time to break the mask, but she didn't want to reveal herself too quickly. No, she wanted everyone to feel the weight of their actions first. She wanted them to see that behind every face, rich or poor, was a human being worthy of respect. And in a few more minutes, they would realize the biggest shock of their lives. The restaurant lights sparkled above Sarah's head as she stood near her table. She hadn't eaten her food. She wasn't even hungry anymore. The humiliation burned in her chest like fire, but she kept her face calm. She wanted to see how far this game would go. Mark swaggered around, greeting other tables like a king. He shook hands with guests, told jokes loudly, and acted like he owned the whole place. The staff followed his lead, serving some customers with fake smiles and ignoring others they thought looked unimportant. Sarah slowly walked toward the front desk where the hostess stood. The hostess, a young woman named Lily, gave her a fake polite smile. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, but her eyes were cold. Sarah didn't answer right away. She looked around the restaurant, her gaze sweeping across the walls, the tables, the golden lights. Every detail was hers. She had chosen the marble floor. She had picked the design of the chairs. Yet these people treated her as if she were dirt on their shoes. Mark came back, annoyed to see her still standing there. "Why are you hanging around? Didn't you get your change?" he barked, his voice echoing across the restaurant. A few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Yes," she said softly, her voice calm but steady. "I got my change." She dropped the coins on the counter. The sound was sharp and clear, making the entire room go silent for a moment. Then she said, "But I think it's time you learned whose change it really is." Mark blinked, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, crossing his arms. His tone was full of arrogance. The waiters nearby leaned closer, curious. Sarah didn't answer him directly. Instead, she turned to Lily, the hostess, and asked, "Can you bring me the staff attendance book? I'd like to see today's record." Lily frowned. "I'm sorry, but only the manager can authorize that." Sarah's calm eyes locked on Mark. "I know," she said simply. "That's why I'm asking." Mark laughed, a sharp sound that made even some customers flinch. "Who do you think you are? Some inspector? This isn't a game, lady." But his laughter was cut short when Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small black folder. She placed it gently on the counter, opening it to show a set of documents. At the very top was a certificate with her full name, Sarah Johnson, owner and founder. The air in the restaurant froze. The sound of forks and knives stopped. Even the music playing in the background seemed too loud now. Everyone stared at the papers in shock. Mark's jaw dropped. His face turned pale. This can't be," he stammered. Sarah looked straight at him. "It is," she said firmly. "This place is mine. Every wall, every chair, every paycheck you've ever received. And tonight, I came undercover to see how my staff treats people." Gasps rippled through the room. The waiters who had laughed at her earlier now looked like they wanted to sink into the ground. Lily's fake smile vanished. Only James, the young waiter who had helped Sarah, stood tall, his respect for her shining in his eyes. Mark stumbled backward, his arrogance melting away like ice in the sun. His lips trembled, and sweat broke out across his forehead. I didn't know," he whispered, voice shaking. "I thought you were just—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The shame was choking him. Sarah's voice rang through the restaurant, calm but strong. "You thought I was poor. You thought I didn't belong here. You thought you were better than me because of how I looked." She took a slow step forward. "But what you didn't know is that real power doesn't always wear a fancy suit. True wealth doesn't always shine on the outside. And respect is something every human deserves." The customers clapped softly, their applause growing louder and louder until it filled the entire restaurant. Some stood up, cheering. "Bravo," one man shouted. "That's what real leadership looks like." Mark's legs shook. He wanted to disappear. The other staff tried to smile nervously, hoping to escape the anger building in Sarah's eyes. But Sarah didn't rush. She wanted them to feel this moment, to remember it forever. She turned to James, the only one who had treated her with kindness. "Thank you," she said warmly. "You showed respect when others chose to laugh. You will be remembered for that." James blushed, his eyes wide. Then Sarah turned back to Mark. "And as for you..." She let her words hang in the air like a heavy storm about to break. Everyone leaned in, waiting to hear his fate. Mark swallowed hard, his pride shattered. For the first time all evening, he wished he had shown kindness instead of cruelty. The silence in the restaurant was heavy. Everyone's eyes stayed fixed on Sarah and Mark. The proud manager, who had once strutted like a king, now stood trembling like a child caught stealing. His face was red, his lips dry, and his hands twisted nervously at his sides. Sarah let the moment stretch. She wanted the staff, and even the customers, to feel the weight of what had just happened. "I built this restaurant with my own hands," she began, her voice calm, but carrying to every corner of the room. "I didn't do it so people could be disrespected here. I didn't create this place for cruelty and arrogance." Mark opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah raised her hand sharply. The gesture stopped him cold. "You don't get to speak," she said, her voice like steel. "You had your chance when you tossed those coins on the ground." The customers clapped again, louder this time. Some cheered. A woman shouted, "Teach him a lesson." Others nodded firmly, proud of Sarah's strength. Mark shifted on his feet, his pride gone. His eyes darted to the other staff, but none of them came to his defense. They were just as guilty, and they knew it. Sarah's gaze swept across the group. "Every one of you laughed," she said slowly, her eyes piercing through them. "Except James. You chose to mock instead of respect. You chose to follow the worst example instead of doing what's right." Lily, the hostess, looked down, her cheeks burning with shame. The waiters hung their heads, wishing they could vanish into thin air. James, however, stood taller, though his hands trembled slightly. Sarah turned back to Mark, her expression sharp. "You think power is about standing over people. You think wealth is about looking rich. But let me tell you something, Mark. Real power is about lifting people up, not crushing them. Mark swallowed hard, but he couldn't argue. His arrogance was gone, his mask shattered. He felt smaller than ever. Sarah stepped closer, so close that Mark had to take a step back. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Please, don't fire me. I'll change." But Sarah didn't soften. Her eyes stayed hard, though her tone carried a strange calm. "When you threw those coins at my feet, you weren't just insulting me. You insulted this restaurant. You insulted every person who ever walked through those doors. You betrayed the very thing this place was built on, respect." The customers erupted in applause again, some whistling. The staff's faces grew paler by the second. Sarah let the applause fade before she spoke again. "This restaurant will never tolerate arrogance again. Every staff member here must understand this. It doesn't matter what someone wears. It doesn't matter how much money they have. Every single person deserves dignity." Her words hit like thunder. Even the chandeliers above seemed to tremble in the echo. James blinked quickly, holding back tears. He had worked here only a few months, and tonight he felt seen for the first time. Sarah caught his eyes and gave him a small nod that filled him with pride. But for Mark, the nod was like a sword. His legs wobbled, and he could barely breathe. "Please," he whispered again, but the words were swallowed by the room's heavy silence. Sarah folded her arms. "You will face the consequences," she said firmly. "And everyone in this room will remember this moment for the rest of their lives." The customers leaned forward, waiting for the next words. The staff gripped their aprons tightly. Mark's lips trembled. His fate was about to be sealed. Mark's mind raced. He thought of excuses, of lies he could tell. Maybe he could say he was tired. Maybe he could pretend he was under stress. But no excuse could erase the image of coins rolling across the floor or the sound of laughter he had encouraged. Sarah turned toward the customers and raised her voice. "You came here tonight to enjoy a meal, not to witness cruelty. I'm sorry you had to see that. But let this be a lesson for all of us. Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of this place." The customers applauded again, louder than ever. Some even stood up, clapping as if they were watching a play. Sarah's words had touched them deeply. Then Sarah faced her staff again. "From this moment forward, this restaurant will change. We will not judge people by their clothes, by their money, or by the color of their skin. We will serve every guest with dignity." Her eyes burned as they locked onto Mark. "And anyone who cannot live by that rule does not belong here." The words struck like lightning. Mark gasped, his knees weak. He realized what she meant, but he couldn't bring himself to say it aloud. His eyes darted around, searching for someone to save him. But the staff looked away, ashamed. The customers stared at him with disgust. Only James looked steady, his young face glowing with hope. Sarah placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This is what real respect looks like," she said to the room. "One person doing the right thing, even when everyone else chose the wrong." Mark's lips trembled. He knew what was coming next. Sarah took a deep breath, ready to announce his punishment. The room leaned in, waiting. Mark's heart hammered in his chest. Sweat ran down his forehead, and he wiped it quickly with his sleeve. The man who once barked orders and strutted like a king was now trembling like a leaf in a storm. He wanted to run, but his legs felt like stone. Sarah looked at him with steady eyes. "Mark," she said, her voice cold but calm, "you have shown me who you are. You showed everyone here what happens when someone lets pride and cruelty guide them. You forgot that the person you mock might be the one who holds your future in their hands." Mark opened his mouth to beg again, but Sarah raised her hand sharply. "Enough," she said. The single word silenced him completely. The room was so quiet that the clink of a glass in the corner sounded like thunder. Customers leaned forward, their eyes wide, as if watching a play on stage. The staff stood frozen, afraid even to breathe. Sarah turned her gaze away from Mark and swept it across the room. "Let me tell you all something," she said, her voice rising with passion. "I didn't build this restaurant for wealth alone. I built it to be a place where people feel valued, where anyone can walk in, rich or poor, dressed in silk or in simple clothes, and be treated with respect. That is the heart of this place." The crowd broke into applause again, their claps echoing like rolling waves. Mark felt the weight of every sound pressing down on him. Then Sarah faced him again. "But you," she shook her head slowly. "You spat on that vision. You humiliated a guest, not knowing she was the very person who signs your paycheck. You tossed dignity on the floor like loose change." Her words hit him harder than any punch. His knees wobbled. He whispered, "Please, don't take everything away from me." But Sarah's eyes were sharp as glass. "The only thing I'm taking," she said firmly, "is the position you never deserved." The gasps that filled the restaurant almost shook the walls. Mark staggered backward as if the words themselves had struck him. His face drained of all color. He clutched the counter for support, but even that felt like it was slipping away. You're firing me?" he stammered, his voice breaking. Sarah nodded once, her expression calm but unshakable. "Yes," she said, "effective immediately. You are no longer manager of this restaurant." The words hung in the air like a sword. The staff exchanged shocked glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. Customers clapped loudly, some even cheering. "Good riddance," one man shouted. "He deserved that." Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. He tried to argue, but no words came out. His pride, his power, his position, it had all crumbled in seconds. He looked around desperately, but no one rushed to defend him. The staff who once laughed at his cruel jokes now looked away in shame. They knew they might be next. Sarah's eyes softened slightly, though her tone stayed firm. "Mark, let this be a lesson for you," she said. "Respect is free, but it can cost you everything if you refuse to give it." Her words pierced deeper than any insult. For the first time in years, Mark felt truly small. He lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. Slowly, he removed the manager's badge pinned to his shirt. His hands shook as he placed it on the counter. The customers clapped again, louder than ever. Some even stood, applauding Sarah for her courage. The sound filled the room, drowning out the shame burning in Mark's chest. He turned and walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. As he pushed the door open, Sarah's voice rang out behind him. "Let this moment remind everyone. The way you treat others will always return to you." The door closed with a thud. Mark was gone, but the lesson he left behind would stay forever. The room buzzed with energy. Customers whispered excitedly, telling each other how unbelievable the scene had been. Some pulled out their phones, secretly recording the aftermath, knowing this story would spread far beyond these walls. Sarah stood tall, her calm presence commanding respect. She turned back to her staff, their eyes glued to the floor. "I hope you understand something," she said softly, but the softness carried more weight than a scream. "Tonight was a test, and most of you failed." The staff squirmed, guilt heavy on their shoulders. Lily, the hostess, bit her lip, wishing she could disappear. A few waiters glanced at James, jealousy flickering in their eyes. Sarah continued, "Laughter at someone else's pain is cruelty. Silence in the face of disrespect is weakness. But standing up for what's right, that is true strength. And only one person here showed me that tonight." Her eyes landed on James. The young waiter's heart pounded as she smiled at him. "James," she said warmly, "you are an example of the kind of person I want working here." James's eyes widened. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. He had never felt so valued in his life. Sarah nodded. "From today, things will be different. This restaurant will not just serve food, it will serve respect. And if anyone cannot do that, they will follow the same path as Mark." The staff nodded quickly, their faces pale. They knew she meant every word. The customers burst into applause once more, cheering Sarah's name. Some even stood to shake her hand, grateful to see a leader who demanded more than just profit. Sarah's heart swelled, but her mind was already racing. She knew this night was only the beginning. The test had revealed cracks in her team, and now she would have to rebuild them from the ground up. The applause slowly faded, but the weight of Sarah's words remained heavy in the air. The staff stood stiff, avoiding her eyes. Some customers whispered, "I'll never forget this night," while others pulled out their phones to capture Sarah's powerful speech. The restaurant that once hummed with shallow laughter now throbbed with respect. Sarah let the silence stretch, forcing her staff to stand in their guilt. She wanted them to feel this moment deep in their bones. Finally, she spoke again. "This restaurant is not a stage for arrogance. It is not a place for cruelty. From this night forward, we will start fresh. But understand, fresh starts require honesty." Her eyes swept the staff one by one. "Each of you will tell me what you thought when you saw Mark humiliate me. And don't lie. I'll know." The waiters shifted nervously. Lily cleared her throat. I thought you didn't belong here," she admitted, her voice trembling. I judged you by your clothes. Sarah nodded slowly. At least you admit it. Remember, honesty is the first step to change. Another waiter, Tom, spoke up. I laughed. He confessed, shame heavy in his voice. I thought it was funny, but now I see it was cruel. Each worker confessed in turn, their voices cracking with guilt. Sarah listened carefully, her face calm, though her heart ached. These were people she had trusted with her dream, yet they had failed so easily. When James's turn came, he lifted his chin. I didn't laugh, he said softly. I knew it was wrong. That's why I helped. His words were simple, but they carried more power than all the excuses before. Sarah gave him a small, proud nod. And that is why you will rise in this place. The staff gasped. James blinked in shock, unsure if he had heard correctly. The staff stared at James with wide eyes. The boy who had been invisible just moments ago was suddenly standing in the light of recognition. Sarah smiled at him. James, from today, you are no longer just a waiter. You will be trained to become an assistant manager. Gasps filled the room. Lily's mouth dropped open. Tom muttered under his breath, but Sarah silenced them with one glance. Respect earns reward, she said firmly. And James showed respect when it mattered most. James's heart pounded in his chest. His eyes watered, and he bowed his head. Thank you, ma'am, he whispered, his voice shaking. He had never been given such a chance in his life. The customers clapped again, some even shouting, Bravo! A man at the front table called out. That's the kind of leadership the world needs. Sarah let the applause wash over the room before she raised her hand. Silence fell once more. But let this be clear, she said. This is not just about James. It's about all of you. Tonight, I saw who you really are. Some of you chose cruelty. Some chose silence. Only one chose courage. I cannot erase what happened, but I can give you the chance to do better. If you want to stay here, you must change. The staff nodded quickly, desperate to keep their jobs. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. But if any of you ever again treat a guest with disrespect, whether rich or poor, black or white, young or old, you will leave this place immediately. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. They chorused, their voices shaky. Sarah's gaze softened just a little. Good, she said. Because this restaurant will not just be a place where food is served. It will be a place where every person is valued. That is my vision, and I will see it through. Her words struck deep, planting seeds of fear, respect, and perhaps, for the first time, true loyalty. The customers began finishing their meals, but their eyes never left Sarah. Some walked over to shake her hand. Others thanked her for standing up for dignity. One woman leaned in and whispered, You've inspired me tonight. I'll never judge someone by their looks again. Sarah smiled kindly. That's the real victory, she replied. Meanwhile, the staff huddled in the corner, whispering among themselves. Their laughter from earlier had turned into nervous chatter. They were shaken, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Lily bit her lip, thinking about her confession. Tom rubbed his hands together, regret heavy in his chest. James, however, stood quietly, still stunned by Sarah's words. He thought of his mother, who always told him, kindness will never fail you. Tonight, he had proof. Sarah noticed him standing alone. She walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. James, meet me tomorrow morning in my office, she said. We'll talk about your future here. James nodded quickly, his eyes shining with hope. When Sarah turned back to the room, she felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride because she had stood for what was right. Sadness because her own team had failed her test so badly. But she also knew that sometimes people only change after facing the truth head-on. Tonight had been that moment. She picked up the folder with her ownership documents and tucked it back into her bag. Then she looked around the restaurant one last time, her eyes sweeping the golden lights, the marble floor, the tables she had once polished with her own hands. This was her dream, and no one, not arrogance, not cruelty, would destroy it. The restaurant finally began to settle, but the energy in the air was different now. It wasn't just a busy evening anymore. It was a night no one would ever forget. Customers whispered to one another, replaying the shocking scene they had just witnessed. Some even pulled out their phones, already typing furiously to friends. You won't believe what just happened at this place. Sarah knew the story would spread like wildfire. She didn't mind. In fact, she wanted it to. This lesson wasn't just for her staff. It was for anyone who thought respect could be measured by clothes or money. Mark's absence was like a shadow lifted. The atmosphere felt lighter, though the shame of his actions still lingered. Sarah walked to the center of the restaurant and raised her voice once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience tonight. I promise you this. What you saw will not be forgotten, and it will never happen here again." Applause thundered once more. Customers stood, some even saluting her courage. A little girl at one table tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, she's like a queen." Sarah heard it and smiled faintly. She didn't feel like a queen. She felt like a woman who had fought too hard to let disrespect ruin her dream. As the night wound down, Sarah excused herself to her office upstairs. James followed behind her, still dazed from everything that had happened. He couldn't stop thinking, "Why me? Why did she notice me?" Sarah sat at her desk and motioned for James to sit. "Tell me about yourself," she said softly. James swallowed hard. I don't have much to tell, ma'am. I came here because I needed a job. My mom's sick, and I'm trying to support her. That's all." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes kind. "And yet, in the middle of all that pressure, you chose kindness. You chose respect. That is not small, James. That is everything." James's eyes watered, and for the first time, he believed his life could truly change. Downstairs, the rest of the staff cleaned up in silence. The clinking of plates and glasses was the only sound. No one dared speak about what had happened, though the weight of it pressed heavy on their minds. Lily kept replaying the moment Sarah exposed herself as the owner. She felt a sting of regret so sharp it made her chest ache. Tom, however, was less remorseful. He leaned toward another waiter and muttered, "She embarrassed us. Imagine, pretending to be a poor woman just to trick us. Who does that?" The waiter frowned. "She owns the place, Tom. She can do what she wants." Tom scoffed, but didn't reply. Deep inside, he was angry, not at Sarah, but at himself. He had laughed when Mark mocked her, and now he was branded as one of the guilty ones. Meanwhile, Lily's guilt grew heavier. She thought of all the times she had judged customers by their appearance. Tonight had opened her eyes, and she didn't like what she saw in herself. She whispered a silent promise. "If I get another chance, I'll change." As the last tables were wiped and the lights dimmed, the staff left one by one, each lost in thought. But the story was far from over. Sarah's decision to test them had shaken the entire foundation of the restaurant. Tomorrow would not be the same. Some would rise, some would fall, and some would fight the changes Sarah was about to bring. Because while Sarah had removed Mark, she knew the deeper challenge wasn't firing one man. It was transforming the hearts of everyone who worked under her roof. James left Sarah's office that night with a new sense of purpose. His steps were lighter, his chest fuller. For the first time, he felt like his work mattered. He thought about telling his mother everything, how the owner herself had noticed him, how he might become assistant manager. He imagined her smile, her proud tears. Sarah, however, stayed behind in her office, staring at the walls. She thought of her journey, the endless nights, the sacrifices, the years of struggle to build this place. And now, her staff had almost ruined it in one evening. She knew she couldn't let that happen again. She pulled out a notebook and began to write. At the top of the page, she wrote one word in bold letters: respect. Under it, she began jotting new rules. Every customer is equal. No judgment by clothes or money. Staff must show kindness at all times. She wrote late into the night, her pen moving quickly, her mind sharper than ever. By the time she closed the notebook, she had drafted an entire new code of conduct for her restaurant. Tomorrow, she would present it to the staff. Tomorrow, the real change would begin. And tomorrow, she would find out who was willing to change and who wasn't. The next morning, the staff gathered nervously in the restaurant. No one knew exactly what Sarah would do, but everyone felt the weight of her presence as she entered the room with quiet authority. She placed her notebook on the counter and looked each of them in the eye. "Last night taught us all something," she began. "Respect cannot be faked. It's not about money. It's not about status. It's about how we treat people when no one is watching." The room was silent. Even Tom lowered his gaze. Sarah continued, "This restaurant isn't just a place to eat. It's a reflection of my dream, my hard work, and my values. And from today forward, it will also be a reflection of yours. Those who cannot live by the values of respect and kindness cannot stay here." Her words cut sharp but fair. Then she turned to James. "And those who embody these values, who show compassion even when no one notices, will grow with me. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. James, from today, you are no longer just a waiter. You are the new assistant manager of this restaurant. Gasps echoed through the room. James froze, his eyes wide. Me, he stammered. Sarah smiled warmly. Yes, you. Because leadership is not about power, it's about service. And last night, you proved you understand that better than most. Tears filled James's eyes as the staff clapped reluctantly at first, then louder. Even Lily wiped her eyes, whispering, he deserves it. Sarah closed her notebook. This is the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. If we work together, with respect, we won't just serve food. We'll serve dignity, love, and humanity with every plate. For the first time in a long while, the staff felt hope instead of pressure. Customers would return not just for the meals, but for the experience of being valued. And as Sarah stood in her restaurant that day, she knew the test had worked. Her empire was not built on marble floors or fine wine. It was built on the unshakable foundation of respect. And that, she thought with a smile, would last forever. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more.